Well, here we are, Apple Cup week. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Cook behind the camera, so that might...
You can see there's only one piece of memorabilia for the Apple Cup.
There we go.
And it's right here.
So, yeah.
Legendary Brock Heward jersey. Probably game worn from the one that he threw away out in Wazoo.
Did he really throw it away, or are you making that up?
No, I'm making that
Okay,
up.
so I could see that possibly happening.
He should have. He should have burned it. He should have service for it.
Anyway, we are breaking with the code here at 7:10 today. It is all Apple Cup. Every studio has been taken up. It's going to be a heck of a next couple of days coming up in anticipation. Really good split of the dogs and cats here in the building. Not so much in this room. We are very one-sided.
Yes, go Dogs.
Do you think Howdy is very passionate about
very excited.
Zanino and the
Yes.
Mariners? Forget about it when it comes to the Huskies. We worry about you sometimes.
It's okay. You can worry all you want. This is my life.
Can I make a prediction?
I think the Huskies are going to win by 17.
17?
Yeah, they're going to win big.
All right,
Yeah,
okay.
they're going to win big.
I'm in shock. This is one of the reasons why I don't make predictions. This is video podcast. We're looking for a name. If you have a name, go ahead, send it in. I'm going to try and do this bi-weekly, and as things come up, and this was a scheduled video shoot today, and what do you know? Something came up.
Great job by us to schedule this.
I mean...
Great job.
Well, in both of them. And at first I thought it was because, and Brent said I have to tell this story. In the off season, obviously you take care of all the things that you don't take care of during the season. So it's a lot of appointments, a lot of just getting a lot of stuff done. And just an aside, I mean, our lives get so crazy during the year when we're traveling so much. 1 year, I want to say it was about mid-August, my fridge broke. I came home from a road trip, opened it up, warm.
Oof.
Yeah, nightmare.
Ugh.
Another time I came home, flood. Different story. We'll
Wow.
do that in another podcast. I took everything out of the fridge, threw it out, unplugged it. So we'll deal with this at the end of the season.
And you pushed it down the stairs.
Yeah, did not deal with it until October. That's how things kind of get towards the end of the year. Didn't eat it. I'm like, not eating at home. I'm not at home.
Yeah.
We're traveling so much or whatever. But so I am out yesterday. Eye appointment.
Oh, good timing.
Yes, very good timing, because I can't even see you sitting across from me right now. And driving, and I get to the appointment, look at my phone, walk in, say, we're not doing this today. Something just happened. And, of course, it was the Paxton thing that was coming down. And along those lines, I think I can predict when things are going to happen. I told Brent this, but I was getting my wisdom teeth pulled when Edgar Martinez announced his retirement.
Wow.
And back then we didn't have a video podcast. We were barely online and did a lot more on the actual air. I could not go on the air because of the Novocaine. So I have a dentist appointment coming up.
You should have got on the air. Oh, that would have been so much fun. Oh, I would have loved to hear you on Novocaine. Oh, man.
It was terrible.
Hashtag unfiltered.
But just a little bit of inside info here. Dentist appointment December 18th.
December 18th.
Something is going to happen
Okay.
December 18th. Or the other thing could be Brent Stecker, our wonderful web editor, schedules these podcasts. Last podcast was right after Zanino got traded.
That's right.
So I'm thinking Brent is the mastermind of this entire thing. So if you don't like it, blame Brent.
Now and December 18th. And now being the time when we have an enormous trade, one that really is sort of setting the stage, I think, for the rest of the offseason. Our poor Canadian has gone east and north.
The wrong side of Canada.
Yeah. He's now closer to Montreal than he is to Vancouver, where he's from.
I'll do okay.
God bless that man and his beautiful eagle shoulders. This is a big move. What was your first impression when it came down?
We knew it was coming. So my first impression was, now? You couldn't wait an hour and a half?
Now, when you say you knew it was coming, do you mean more from like an outside perspective? You can look at it and say where the team is structured, where his contract is, or did you feel like you heard a lot of chatter and a lot of movement that there were things happening around this deal?
Both. You really got the feeling, I mean, common sense told you he was going to be traded with the direction that the Mariners were going in, unless the Mariners could have reached a long-term deal with him, and I've heard that they made some efforts to do so. Heard the same with Zanino, both players 2 years out from free agency, and when they couldn't sign them, okay, we're going to see what we can get for them, because at the end of the year, they were very uncertain of the direction that they were going to go in, but you really got the feeling this isn't going to be business as usual and keep trying to add. He was at the top of the list of, I thought, the most movable players and getting something of impact back without dipping into the Edwin Diaz, Mitch Haniger, Marco Gonzalez, it had to be James Paxton. You heard quite a bit about the Yankees, and it sounded like that they had actually zeroed in on the Yankees at that point. So my reaction when I heard it was, okay, now what? Because it was expected. Who's coming back in this direction? And actually, let's go to work. Let's see what they have right here. The bigger surprise than the trade for me was the first words that Jerry Dipoto had after the trade publicly, which thankfully was on our air on the Danny David Moore show. And he came right out and said, it's a step back. We are taking a step back and we are targeting 2020 and 2021. And that is the first time that he's acknowledged. They've said they could go in this direction, they could go in that direction, but he was very definitive in that comment right out of the gates, again later in that interview, and then on the conference call with reporters. So it's huge that James Paxton, obviously, the Mariners brought him up, a huge talent. That's a big part of the news, but I think also a huge part of news is that they are acknowledging that they are going to take that step back, and that Jerry Dipoto is going to do things a little bit differently, where it has been, he was hired, and I don't think they wanted to hear that you need to tear the organization down and start over at that point. I don't think they would have hired somebody who'd said that. I think their ears were open to it, but I don't think that's what you want to tell the brand new president of a club with expectations is, I'm going to come in here and blow the whole thing up and you'll have a nice team in 5 years. Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the last couple of years you've seen them try and build around cores, and now we've got some different cores that are defined. But with the salaries that were already on the books, with the farm system that he inherited, tough to get a lot done. Now he has that ability to do a little bit more. Salaries still, you're not going to go out and make that big purchase, but you can move players and get a little more back, it would appear.
So a lot of what we talked about last time we did this vodcast, I'm calling it a vodcast. For all of you who want to be in the future, here we are. We're in vodcasts. Last time we did one of these vodcasts, we talked about what we thought the strategy might be for the Mariners moving forward. And the step-back strategy was one of the things we talked about, stopping short of trading some of those core players that he named by name at the end of the season that he wouldn't want to trade. James Paxton wasn't on that list. Mike Zunino wasn't on that list, and ultimately they end up getting dealt. So now looking at that, let's look into the thought process of who they were trying to target when taking the step back. You've got 3 players that they added in this deal from the Yankees. Top prospect Justice Sheffield, right-handed pitcher Eric Swanson, and Dom Tom, the other guy I'm going to call, 25-year-old outfielder, played center field in single A last year for the Yankees. Had an impressive 20 stolen base, 20 home run season. Kind of a breakout guy, a 5th-round pick, or 6th-round pick in 2016. So these are the 3 players they target. From a general perspective, what do you think the strategy was in identifying these players, these 3 players, and these 3 types of players?
I know what the strategy was because Dipoto told us what the strategy was. And I think that this answers some questions because there's a lot of back and forth. Did the Mariners get enough? And I think that when you look at dealing James Paxton, you have to be honest in what he was. The potential is all still there. In my opinion, he never stepped up into that ace role. The thing that was keeping him out of that was innings. He wasn't able to stay on the field. Regardless, there were freak accidents. There were things that just were dumb luck that happened. But until you put up at least 200 inning season and your tops is 160, as good as he was last year, he missed 45 games at a crucial time. Also a little slow to make adjustments still. And I think I think is somebody that is going to, this sounds crazy because of what his ceiling is, but I think he is going to continue to develop. If he can stay healthy, I think you are going to see that. But wasn't quite there, and I think there are some question marks about that. Still 2 years left, still relatively cheap at $9 million, so there's a good amount of value there, but how much? And I think some people were thinking they should have gotten something similar in threshold, in ceiling, in James Paxton. And I think that there would have been a chance to get perhaps something that was a little bit more universally regarded as that, but you would have had to go back further and be less major league ready. You're talking about 3 years out. And I don't think that Jerry Dipoto wanted to do that. Certainly if he's targeting 2021, that's not the direction he's going to go. So in the 3 players that he brought back, he said that they were looking for 3 things. They were looking for something of impact. They were looking for something that would provide stability, and that they were looking for something that perhaps could be a breakout or a surprise. And I'm using the wrong word there, but something that had the potential to be something else. And you look at that, and Sheffield was the Yankees' #1 prospect, and there's some questions about him, but I think at the very worst, I'm not buying into this. He's a reliever. I think at the worst, he's probably a 3. We'll see. He's going to continue to develop at the big league level. So he's the impact, and they see him as the impact, and they see him as higher than a #3. The Mariners are very bullish on Justice Sheffield. Something of more stability, and that's when you look at Eric Swanson. I mean, this is a guy looks more like your big starter. 6'3", 6'4", can pitch near the mid-90s. Has developed pitches, not necessarily plus, but as a strike thrower. It looks like he's going to be an innings guy and a solid middle to back.
He'll be an Erasmo
rotation guy. Yeah. Well, I think with more consistency though. And I think he's not. I think he's further along than Erasmo. Erasmo was still developing pitches at this point in his career, and I think he is still kind of figuring things out. I think Swanson might be a little bit more polished, so we'll see. But I think there's more value on that guy now, especially with what we've seen in how bullpens are built. But there's something to be said for that guy that you can plug into the middle or the back of the rotation, like Mike Leake when Mike Leake is at his best. And you know he's going to take that ball every 5 days and kind of keep you in a 3, 4, 5 run range. And hopefully if you're using your bullpen right, it's closer to that 3 and take the ball 5 days later. And then kind of the wild card is DTW, or what, Dom Tom?
Dom Thompson Williams, Dom Tom for short. I'm branding it Dom Tom.
DTW. Really an interesting story. And I think that when you look at him, you look at what Mitch Haniger did. You look at how they looked at Jake Fraley. And these are guys who a little bit advanced in age for the level that they're at, but have made changes of impact. And he did that with his approach last year. And you saw the numbers, you saw the results in those numbers. So I think they are looking at him. They also see him as a 5-tool athlete. I think they are looking at him as kind of being the surprise. And so if you don't like what they got, I remember a lot of the initial reaction to the Mitch Haniger and Gene Segura trade and the Taijuan Walker trade was, you got taken. You did not get enough for Taijuan Walker.
You didn't get any stars.
And
that was
Marte.
the impression. Yeah.
Right. And so look at this one. I'm not saying this is the DTW or the Dom Tom trade, but they believe he'll move quickly and can be a player of impact down the road. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they did target, as we sort of expected and speculated, they targeted guys that they're going to see now. They're not going to expect either one of these two pitching prospects this next year to be answers, to be the major league guy that's going to be at the peak of his career next year. But they are hoping that those two guys are going to be on the team, at least at some point in the year, and very quickly reach the pinnacle of their careers. Because if they're going to be part of the core and you're going to compete in 2 or 3 years, they don't have a lot of lead time to get to that spot if they're really going to be a part of the core reasons why this team is good in 2 or 3 years. So I would expect we're going to see a lot of them next year, and I would expect that the expectations will be high from them after this season's over. They're going to be counted on because they're major league ready.
The question will be the service time and how they play that, and I don't really have a read on how Jerry Dipoto does. I know that Jack Sorenzik had an absolute distaste for trying to manipulate service time. That he said it really didn't do anybody any good, and the agents get involved in the players, and it's bad. If a guy's ready, bring a guy up. It's not worth it. I don't know what they will do in this case, but you certainly want them coming in believing that they have a chance. Here's your new organization. You have a chance to make this rotation. And I think you look at where are they going to better develop at this point. Will it be working on things in AAA, or will it be getting them to the big league level and having them work with that trio of pitching coaches where you have the biomechanics guy, where you have the numbers guy. And interestingly enough, they brought in as a new pitching coach a guy whose background was more developmental. That seems to kind of be lending itself to working with younger pitchers, although Mel Stottlemyre Jr. was very good with the young pitchers as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. If they have a stellar spring training, the two pitchers in particular, I wouldn't be surprised if one is in the rotation to start. But the other thing, they want them up. As they're taking that step back, I asked Dakota the question, does that free you up to do anything this year when it comes to young players? And he said, absolutely. You might bring up a guy a little bit earlier because you have that luxury, and it's not going to be a matter of that kid going, if I screw up, I'm back down in AAA in 2 weeks. They can have a little more leeway to let them learn at the big league level. And I think that's one of the advantages of acknowledging where you are and what you're going to do in taking that step back. More focus becomes on that player. And he said if everything happens the way that we want it to, and that's everything breaking right, they get good experience this year, and you really start to see them take off in the second half of next year. Who does that sound like? Oakland A's.
Very interesting. Looking at it in a vacuum of just the trade itself, James Paxton exits the rotation. Perceivably, Justice Sheffield or Eric Swanson enters the rotation. Legitimate 1-year baseball impact. What's the gap, do you think? What should a Mariners fan expect to be the gap between the Mariners' starting rotation performance with James Paxton in it last year compared to the Mariners' starting rotation moving forward with the pieces they have now?
I don't even look at it because you're not going to be grading it in that. You're going to be grading it in the development of the pieces that you have, and that includes the ongoing development of Marco Gonzalez. What is he going to turn into? Does he take another step? Is he a 3? Is he 2? Is he your opening day starter this year? It's possible, so I don't really look at it. Obviously, you've taken one of your best pitchers out of the rotation. Is the value of him missing a month worth of starts, does that shorten that gap if you've got a young kid pitching decently for the entire season? Doesn't matter. I think the way that you look at this is what are the steps of the pitchers you have that you are going to move forward with next year. What steps do they take? I think that's the most important thing at this point.
Moving forward, can we move into where the Mariners go next, their next types of steps? What are they targeting next? We thought that James Paxton could be moved. Mm-hmm. We now know that they're going to take a step back. From a front office perspective and a roster perspective, what does taking a step back mean now, given the players they have on this roster?
Well, we took a look at what the roster, if the season started today, you could put a roster out there. And it was funny because you came and you looked at the board and you go, okay.
Yeah, ultimately it's not that much different. You still have a pretty good bullpen, and your rotation really doesn't look that much different. You're just minus one guy, and on paper it looks like about a 500-ish team at the current outset. Yeah,
which we'll see. They are still lacking a catcher. There are areas of this what they have right now that are problematic. Obviously, you need somebody that can start every day. Now, do you target somebody that you are going to bring and grow along with these other young players that you've brought in?
It's going to cost something.
It is going to cost something. Everything's on the table right now. It's just the price tags are a lot higher for that Haniger Diaz core that you talk about. I think the preference is to not move them. But if you were to move any of those players, it would be very targeted. It would be, here's your catcher of the future. Here is your number one pitcher of the future. You have some issues with this roster right now, obviously. You need at least one catcher, probably 2. You probably, even if you go and you trade for, because let's say they get a good offer on Gene Segura, they could bring up catching prospect. Cardinals have got one that's major league ready right now. Let's say they trade Gene Segura to the Cardinals. Somebody's got to keep an eye on that. You've got to go get a veteran catcher to pair with that guy. You have a situation right now, I think it is a foregone conclusion, and it's been pretty definitive. We're going to see Dee Gordon in the infield if he's on this team. Well, all of a sudden now you've got a mess at first base. You've got Robinson Cano, you've got Ryan Healy, and you've got Daniel Vogelbach on your bench right now. Obviously somebody's got to move in that group. With what we have right now for a roster, you look at your bench, and is that enough? If Vogelbach is on your bench and your backup catcher, are you going to go without a fourth outfielder? I know that you can slide Dee Gordon over to shortstop if needed, but having an extra first baseman is not ideal by any means. So those are things that they're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, some of those things are much more important in terms of just fielding a respectable team for next year. Maybe not necessarily, you're probably not targeting your backup catcher and your bench as in your fourth outfielder as the things you need to solve long-term moving forward this year. But they don't currently have major league answers at those positions as you would to roll out a roster. So definitely something they're going to need to figure out.
Talk about the different cores.
Yeah, should we go over to the board? We can pause and go over to the board.
No, we're going to stay here.
Oh.
We can look at the board.
Oh, it's so beautiful. You did such a great job.
My handwriting is horrible. The
you
board
wrote
is for
this
us,
board. It's organized. It's got the lineup. It's got the road. I mean, it looks like you submitted this as like a lineup card in a game.
Oh, boy. Well, then fire me now.
Wow, man. Oh, it just looks beautiful. Well, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to enjoy this wonderful
David
diagram.
Freitas leading off and Hanover batting ninth in right field. That's just not
And that's how you win ball games.
And if we were going to use this, Stacey Roster would have come in because she obviously has the best handwriting.
The best handwriting I've seen.
Unbelievable.
So I guess maybe let's go through some of this and identify, let's just go through the starting lineup and identify maybe some of the players that you think are, for sure, we're going to see these guys next year. And some of the players, there might be some question marks as to whether they're here or not. Let's just go around the diamond, starting with David Freitas in the catching position. Do you think that's settled in the way it's going to be moving forward?
No, catching is not settled in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure he'll be in AAA if he's not at the big leagues. I like David Freitas, love having him on the team. His wife is one of the best Twitter followers ever. The greatest little family, love him, but you're not building your team around David Freitas.
We'll rapid fire this, but would you see the Mariners going for a short-term stopgap type solution at the Major League level next year, or do you believe that they will try to identify the catcher of the future to put in the Major League roster next year?
They've got 2 years to find him, and that's the other thing right now. You don't have to do as anything you said right now, right at this very moment, but they are going to have to find that catcher because I'm not sure he's in the system. Joe DiCarlo's down there. He's interesting, but I've got to think that they are targeting a young catcher somewhere and could bring in a veteran to supplement.
Moving forward to first base, Ryan Healy was there for the majority of last season. Robinson Cano is a potential possibility there given what we saw last season. And as you mentioned, Daniel Vogelback on the bench at that position. How do you see that position shaking forward? Who's most likely to stay? Who's most likely to go?
Depends if Dee Gordon is on the team. If Dee Gordon is a tougher player to move because of the salary right now, I anticipate he will be on the team, but if they could move him, I think that they would, as they would any veteran right now that they don't see as a part 2-3 years from now, let alone one that's got a pretty high salary. So, it'll depend. Gordon could fit into that kind of utility. They could move him around. They've been kind of cagey on what they're going to do with him other than that it's going to be in the infield. They've just hired his former infield coach from Miami, and Perry Hill, who helped take him from a shortstop to a Gold Glove second baseman. He's probably going to have to work a lot with Robinson Cano at first base, and I'm not sold Robinson can stick there. It's going to take a lot of work. Obviously didn't have a ton of work there last year, but is that ideal, or are we going to see him a lot more in that DH role? Where does that leave Ryan Healy? I think that you perhaps are looking to move him. The Royals were interested in him last year. Perhaps those talks are revisited.
Interesting. So you would say probably in order then. It's most likely that if someone moved on from that position, it would be Ryan Healy. Least likely?
For Robinson Cano, because it would be hard to move. But again, everybody's on the table right now. And Vogelback is interesting because they want to see what he is. But how do you keep him on the roster and on the bench? That would be a question. Second
base, we've got Dee Gordon there potentially and Robinson Cano. We've mentioned a little bit between the two. It seems, though, it's harder to move Robinson Cano at this point, given that's been the rap since he signed that deal. Everyone said it's going to be impossible to move. However, could you see the Mariners looking at that situation and saying, Dee Gordon is more difficult to move, he makes less money by almost half, I think maybe more than half, and he's a better second baseman defensively, he doesn't have as much market value. Could we flip a Robinson Cano for a guy who has a big contract that expires sooner? Would you see that sort of as a potential matchup in a Robinson Cano trade?
I don't think it's out of the question. I don't think it would be easy to do.
They will have to probably pay down some of the moning in the contract at some point in time.
Without question.
But I think
it's far more likely you cannot move that contract, but I think that I think they would be open.
John Heyman of FanCred mentioned last week that the Mariners could potentially look back into some previous trade talks with the New York Yankees again regarding Jacoby Ellsbury, who is a local kid, missed all of last season, has been injury-plagued. Their contracts are relatively similar, but Ellsbury's ends in 2 years, whereas Cano's ends in 5. That could be a potential one to watch for in terms of did the Mariners pay another $5 to $7 million for the remainder of that difference of the contract and salaries, and then move forward and cut bait at an earlier date. Something I think that's worth watching. Let's move to third base with Kyle Seager.
You just skipped right over shortstop Gene Segura, who I think is a prime candidate
Tell me more.
to be moved. I think that there is interest in Segura. Well, we know there's interest in Segura from other teams. The Yankees are interested in Segura. So I think that's something that you will continue to see explored. And I think that that is somewhere where they are either going to have to pick up that catcher if it gets done, or they are very thin in middle infield depth in the minor leagues. And that's something that you, not just for next year, but for years, you also need to find that guy of the future. So I think with an eye to the future, you might look to kind of switch out with a younger shortstop that is further out, but I think he is a prime candidate right now.
Okay, now we get to third base.
Yes.
Kyle Seager has a pretty big contract. I think at the current moment he's the highest paid third baseman in baseball. Is he the third baseman next year?
I believe he is. I believe there is a degree of respect for what he has done around the league, but not at the price tag that he is at right now, and he's a guy that you look for a bounce back from.
Moving into the DH spot, it's recently vacated by Nelson Cruz. Quick thought on that. Do you think that door is completely closed?
I don't think that, and I think they've been hinting at that from before the season even ended. With the direction that they're going in right now, they don't need one of the best DHs in baseball, and they also would like to have that DH spot open to rotate. And you've got weird flexibility, I think would be a way to put it right now. So I just don't think it's a fit, although he would be, if you're bringing in young kids and trying to teach them the ropes, there's nobody who would be better in a clubhouse facility than Nelson Cruz.
Ryan Healy and Robinson Cano, the names that probably fit there at the current outset of the roster based on how it's structured. If they were to enter the season able to convince Robinson Cano to be the DH, how do you think that would play out?
Well, he's ultimately not going to have a choice. He's not going to be at second base. And it'll be interesting to see, or he's not going to be at second base every day. I mean, they could conceivably try what they did when he came back and move everybody around, and I personally think that was disruptive. I think that, especially if you got younger players that you're trying to settle, and a defense that you're trying to settle. The Mariners, I think, took a step back on defense last year, and part of that was the movement that you saw. So I don't think that's ideal. I think it'll be tough because Robinson likes to play. He likes to play baseball. He likes to be out on the field. He's that guy. Is he going to, really commit himself to really learning first base, and that means failing out there at times and not looking good out there? We'll see. It's clearly not his preference, so the question will be, is it better for him just to take 4 at-bats or be out there on every play?
Swinging around the outfield, left to right, we got Ben Gamal in left field, Malik Smith in center field, and Mitch Haniger in right field. We have 3 younger players, one really young player, one young player, and one pretty young player. Is this the outfield of the future, or is there maybe a movable piece or two in there?
I think the only one written in ink is Haniger. Smith is somebody that I think is going to cover center, maybe almost as a holding a spot for somebody at this point right now. And he's a guy that they can move down the road if they need to. I've got him as part of that new core right now, but he's the most movable, I think, with them. Gamal ultimately is probably going to be that 4th outfielder. I know that there's been interest in him from other teams, but I think also will be a placeholder for a little while because you do have other outfielders that are close. And I've mentioned this quite a bit on my blog and on the air, but I'd really love to see Ben Gamal given a nice, solid shot to play every day. We saw it 2 years ago. He put up nice numbers. The only thing that he's not doing is putting up power numbers. And if he could, it doesn't necessarily have to be the home run, but if he could, more doubles, a few more home runs, he would be a more comfortable fit there for them. But I think going forward into 2019 with what they're doing, it's a decent fit.
Mitch Haniger in the corner, the most valuable asset the Mariners have. It seems as though they've signaled that there is going to be major change, and Jerry DiPoto's mentioned Mitch Haniger is one of the guys that he initially said was off limits. On Danny David Moore, he mentioned that they'd have to be overwhelmed and floored to be able to move a player like Mitch Haniger, seeing as how they believe that they're going to be ready in 2 or 3 years. What's the likelihood that somebody does blow their doors off to get Mitch Haniger?
That's a good question. I would say probably not great. I like to think that a lot of organizations have somebody similar to Mitch Haniger, although then you look, the MVP voting, people have taken notice of what he does. So I think that there would be questions. I think he would be one of the first players that teams would approach the Mariners about, but how much would they give up it would just, I think that would be just a tough match with anybody, and I think that ultimately the Mariners need Mitch Haniger more than anybody else does.
Quick run through the starting rotation. We've got lead starter, number 1 ace, Marco Gonzalez, followed by Mike Leake, Wade LeBlanc, one of the former Yankees. They'll be referred to as former Yankees until they prove something, because that's all the baseball community cares about. And Felix Hernandez. You have a question mark at the end? I'm Ron Burgundy. So, how do you feel about that rotation? If you were going to open the season tomorrow, how would you feel?
I would hope that they are not letting Roenis Elias go tonight and exposing him to the Rule 5 draft. You're going to need more. Although both of the former Yanks should be ready at some point of the season. And again, the rotation, it's going to be about development. Felix is a question mark. Is he in the rotation? Is he in the bullpen to start the season? We'll see. Wade LeBlanc, should they acquire other starters, can pitch out of either. Mike Leake, you're hoping for, he made his starts last year. You're hoping for a little better results this year. And still in trade, can Marco Gonzalez take another step forward?
I'm going to be a little terse about the bullpen. You've got 2 good players in Edwin Diaz and Alex Colomé. Then you've got Juan Nicasio's contract. And then you've got 4 guys by the names of Armstrong, Bradford, Rumbelow, and Elias.
Yeah.
Tell me what you see there.
I've got 24 people up on our board, and that's a problem. I see a bullpen that's going to be in a little bit of flux. Colomé could have some value, but he's very expensive. I believe $9 million is the arbitration estimate for him next year.
Which is high, but considering the price of bullpen contracts moving forward, the top guys, the top closers in the game are making $18 to $21 million a year.
I think he is a prime candidate for a trade deadline. You might get more for him at the trade deadline when the salary is down and nobody cares at that point. If they need that guy, they're going to go get that guy. So I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't moved. Nicasio just
$8 million.
Tough year last year on the injury front, tough year on the numbers and luck front. So we'll see if he has a bounce back. You've got some guys that are out of options, and Sean Armstrong, who they like, Nick Rumbelow, Elias, who they might need. Jason Bradford will be there. Dan Altavilla, I forgot to put up there. They've got a lot of arms.
Yeah, they have a lot of depth arms, and that sort of could be great, probably not terrible role, that have some major league experience or some elite pitching talent in some way that you would hope they can turn into a major league reliever in the near future. But this brings up the biggest question that remains in the offseason, the one that will define what 2019 looks like for the Seattle Mariners and beyond. Will Edwin Diaz be traded this season?
I don't think so, and I know it makes a lot of sense at where they're at right now, and if he isn't traded, I think that shows that they feel very good that he is going to stand up. That I think that they don't believe that he will have the pitfalls of volatility of some relievers, and really there was nothing to show it last year as far as his pitching goes. And I think we've talked about it. If last year was his best year, I'll take 85%. That's going to be the best year for most in baseball. On a health end, they know him better than anyone else. So I think there is a very good chance that he will still be on the team, even though a lot of people believe he could be moved.
Now, if they were to trade Edwin Diaz, relative to what this James Paxton trade package looked like, what would you see Edwin Diaz getting back in that realm of trades?
I think then you are going back to the younger, higher upside, further away from the big leagues with him.
And that would fill a hole in their farm system, if I'm not correct. They don't have a lot of ultra-young, elite talent that's single-A level, that's, man, if this all happens, we're looking at the next Carlos Correa types. That doesn't really exist in their farm system. They may have had that in Sam Carlson when they drafted him and surprised people by being able to sign him, a former first-round pick towards the end of the first round, I believe. Minnesota high school kid who then immediately got Tommy John surgery, and now who knows what's going to happen. But that's the type of player they don't really have.
He'll be okay. He'll be a year and a half off.
Okay. But they don't have that type of player anymore, really, in their farm system. They don't have that 17 to 20-year-old player who's like, that guy could be a generational talent. And I would think...
they would probably trade him.
Yeah, right? He'd be gone already. But that is... it's something to be said, because that is some of what Jerry Dipoto's philosophy so far. When he adds prospects, it's typically undervalued lower-level prospects. Right. Or it's sort of, maybe a little bit discounted, close to Major League ready talent that maybe has a higher floor, lower ceiling type of prospect. So they really haven't had that young prospect that's boom or bust, but if it booms, we're talking about generational talent.
No, they do. They've got the Rodriguez kid right now that a lot of people are very excited about. But again,
signing.
very far off at this point, and we'll see how quickly they move. So it's, sometimes they're a little bit tougher to see. They certainly don't have that many of them, but there is a lot of excitement about that. One of the things that DePoto spelled out when he was defining where this team was right now were kind of the different levels that they have coming, and I think that if you look at it that way, I think your eyes open up a little bit to, okay, they have made some progress in this department. You talk about the new core, Haniger, Diaz, Gonzalez, and Smith. Then you have those that are close to Major League ready in Sheffield, Swanson, and Jake Fraley. And then you have a couple that we could see in 2019 as perhaps a September call-up, and definitely targeted in 2020 with Kyle Lewis and Evan White. That's a big boost if you are adding both of those players as far as prospects go and youth-wise and part of the core. And after that, they don't believe Logan Gilbert, Josh Stowards would be too far behind, and somewhere Dom Tom is in that mix too, kind of between those two. So it's kind of a significant amount of players there, core players that are very carefully curated,
yes,
I will say.
Well, they need to be, because they don't have the depth in the farm system. So when we talk about the deep farm systems or highly ranked farm systems, one of the things that other teams get benefits out of the Mariners don't is they have a lot more lottery tickets. When the Mariners have these types of players, and when they add a Dom Tom and they add Justice Sheffield, they need those guys to hit. They have to have a higher rate of getting right when they add prospects, because they just simply don't have as many people to go through. Whereas a system like the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Astros, the Cardinals, they have a larger pool of lottery tickets that if 50% of them don't work out, they still have the same number of prospects left that the Mariners do in terms of industry reputation. So I think that's where this rebuild effort, this fast-track rebuild effort, can be a little risky. They have to hit. They can't afford to miss on too many of these guys. Evan White, Kyle Lewis, both of those guys can't be bad and this thing turn over as fast as they want it to. They need to hit on those guys because they just don't have that many options in the high-level prospect realm.
But if they do, and if you look at it, it's rare when you see a team bring up two young players in a year and they both hit.
Right.
It's rare if you see one for some teams.
Yes.
You take a look at the Mariners and how long it's been since you have seen that player. But then you can take a look, and you can look at the Oakland Athletics and how they've brought up young players together. And I think this really seems to be kind of modeling itself after that a little bit. You're not so much raising your own players, although Oakland doesn't. A lot of those players were acquired through trade
as minor leaguers.
So I think that perhaps that is kind of a direction to go when you're looking at what they're trying to do. A little less Astros, perhaps a little bit more your other division rival.
So we start to wrap this up. Let's just look a little bit forward. What would you say, what do you anticipate the next types of moves or the next types of things we should be seeing in the Mariners roster chart, in the Mariners calendar?
Something to destroy my Thanksgiving. I'm sure it's going to happen. Pies go in the oven, phone's going to ring, Twitter's going to explode, and yeah. I think the biggest thing is the catcher. Something has got to be done there. And I do think that you're going to see one of Segura, Gordon, perhaps Colomé, be moved and get something back of value. Everybody's up for grabs right now, but your biggest need is catcher. And then I think really just kind of finding a way to restock a little bit in that middle infield and always looking for starting pitching. But I think Segura probably has the best bet at being the next one.
I agree with you, and put me on the record that Robinson Cano will be moved this offseason. I believe it. I think he's going to be moved.
The Huskies will win by 17.
And they'll win by 17. And I'm going to randomly run into $5,000 tomorrow that someone's going to give me too. So while I'm at it, I'm just going to keep going with things that will benefit me. So thank you, Shannon, for involving me in this. Thank you for this podcast. Thank you to all of you who are watching. Happy Thanksgiving. If you're watching after Thanksgiving, good for you.